and His Royal Highness Prince Charles, who can trace his ancestry back to Romania's dark and distant past.
The genealogy shows that I'm descended from Vladimir Pavlovich, so I do have a bit of a stake in the country.
As it were.
They want to be, the place they should be, and it's warm and safe.
Turns out Cheney's not his only connection to the White House. Obama is distantly related to 6 presidents: George W. and George H.W. Bush, Gerald Ford, Lyndon Johnson, Harry S. Truman, and James Madison. Obama's family tree also includes Sir Winston Churchill and Civil War General Robert E. Lee. And turns out the Illinois senator got his.
Many of the United States presidents have blood relations with each other. The Bush lineage has blood ties to a great number of former presidents: George Washington, Millard Fillmore, Franklin Pierce, Abraham Lincoln, Ulysses Grant, Rutherford Hayes, James Garfield, Grover Cleveland, Teddy Roosevelt, William Taft, Calvin Coolidge, Herbert Hoover, Franklin Roosevelt, Richard Nixon, and Gerald Ford. Michael Tessarian points out in his work that Bush is closely related to every European monarch on and off the throne, and has kinship with every member of Britain's royal family. Bush's family tree can be documented as far back as the early 15th century. He has a direct descent from Henry III and from Henry VIII's sister Mary Tudor. He is also descended from Charles II of England. And we also find that George W. Bush is a direct descendant of Godfrey de Bouillon. Godfrey was the first king of Jerusalem after he recaptured it from the Saracens, which was the name for the Islamic faith during the Middle Ages. It is interesting to note that the current occupation of the United States in the Middle East was re-established by the same family, George Bush Sr. in 1991, and again by George Bush Jr. in 2003. George Bush Jr. is then found to be a cousin to both opposing candidates of his 2 terms in office, Al Gore and John Kerry. Democratic President Barack Obama also has blood ties with George W. Bush.
It's a great thing for history.
George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, William Howard Taft, and President Barack Obama. One young girl traced them all back to one common ancestor.
They're all cousins and all grandsons of John Lackland.
It's the first family tree of its kind. Pouring through more than 500,000 names for months, 12-year-old Bridge Ann d'Avignon discovered that all the U.S. presidents, except Martin Van Buren, are related to the former King of England, John Lackland Plantagenet, signer of the Magna Carta in 1215.
Mildred Reed is his first great-grandmother on George Washington, and on Obama, Mildred Reed is the 10th great-grandmother.
It started as an assignment to research her own lineage, tracing it back to roots in France. But Bridge Ann wanted to branch out.
Well, I think we just all go back somewhere. It's just a matter of proving it.
She started with George Washington, but unlike other professional genealogists that only looked at the male family lines, Bridge Ann was able to link the presidents together using both male and female ancestry. Before this, historians had only been able to link 22 family trees.
She kind of created a triumph of women's studies here.
Bridge Ann also figured out she's an 18th cousin of President Obama, something she hopes to be able to share with him in person.
I've written a letter to Obama, but I just gotten standard reply. I hope to meet the president and explain it to him.
In Paso Robles, Adam Rakusin, your Central Coast News.
Took on a human wife as well. And this bloodline could be still here today propagating. And I really believe that's the bloodline that started the Pharaonic bloodline, which then migrated after the last Pyramid War into Arabia and then into Europe. So the bloodline actually evolved over time, but they kept it along a specific route. When it got to Europe, it was the Plantagenet bloodline that is still ruling the planet until this day. And that Plantagenet bloodline is John Lackland's line. John Lackland is the King of England that signed the Magna Carta. But every single...
King John from...
Exactly.
From the Robin Hood legend.
Exactly, yes. Mm-hmm. And every president of the United States of America is related to John Lackland and that Plantagenet bloodline, which goes back to the Arabian kings, which goes back to the Egyptian pharaohs, which then goes back to the Sumerian kings list in Iraq. Think about that for a minute. The only one president that's not related to that bloodline is Van Buren.
So if we look at the nature of the Anunnaki...
Now that we know Vice President Dick Cheney and Senator Barack Obama are distant cousins, the New York Post decided to check into the genealogy of President Bush. And his family tree has people talking. Early Show national correspondent Tracy Smith has the story of George W. Bush's many relations.
My honor to bring to you the 41st president, a great dad, George H.W. Bush.
We all know his father, but what about his cousins? Check out this family tree, done with research by Ancestry.com.
What would you say if I told you he's related to all of those people?
That you're wrong.
Oh, no, I'm not. Let me take you through this, branch by branch.
The 101st Airborne Division, Air Assault.
Vice President Dick Cheney, the man who's only a heartbeat away from the presidency, is actually a blood relation. He's President Bush's 9th cousin once removed. Cheney's cousin Barack Obama is also Bush's 11th cousin and the 9th cousin of Brad Pitt. But we're only just getting started. President Lincoln was President Bush's 7th cousin 5 times removed, and Bush shared more than just a ballot with John Kerry. That's right, they're 9th cousins twice removed.
Really? What do you think of that?
Yeah, they have the same chin.
There's also royalty in the Bush bloodline. Princess Diana was Bush's 11th cousin twice removed. And then there's this bombshell.
Happy birthday, Mr. President.
Sure, she may have been singing to JFK, but what about GWB? He is, after all, her 9th cousin 3 times removed.
Maybe it's the eyebrows. I think
They have the same eyebrows?
He's also related to Playboy founder Hugh Hefner, even Pocahontas, and Vlad the Impaler. Trace the family tree far enough, and you get Madonna, Celine Dion, and Tom Hanks.
My mom always said life was like a box of chocolates.
After all, genealogy can sometimes be like a box of chocolates. You never know who you're going to get. For The Early Show, Tracy Smith, no relation to George Bush that I know of. CBS News, New York.